I don't even know how to start this, but I was completely terrified by what happened that day. I hope my story gets chosen because I think someone out there might relate. It was late, one of those Fridays where the week's exhaustion clings to you like a second skin. The air outside was crisp, sharp enough to make me pull my jacket tighter as I stepped out of the car. The parking lot was nearly deserted. Only my car and another sat there, tucked far into the shadows. The other vehicle was so obscure that I couldn't tell if it was occupied or abandoned. The old cinema loomed ahead, its once bright sign now missing letters, glowing dimly like a fading memory. I hesitated at the door, but a gust of wind pushed me forward. Inside, the stale smell of popcorn and something faintly metallic hit me. It wasn't welcoming, but I convinced myself it was just an old building being old. As I walked through the hallway toward the auditorium, something fell off. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, flickering every few seconds. I noticed the sound first, a faint scuffling, like shoes dragging across the sticky carpet. I stopped, turning sharply, but the hallway behind me was empty. Just a long stretch of flickering light and shadows that seemed to reach farther than they should. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding too loud against the silence. No answer. I told myself it was nothing. The wind, maybe, or an echo. The auditorium was almost empty, which wasn't surprising for a late show at a theater no one really cared about anymore. Just me and one other person, a man sitting at the farthest corner of the room. He didn't move when I walked in. His silhouette was rigid, upright, like he was carved out of stone. Even when the previews started, the glow from the screen lit up the room, but he remained completely still. I tried not to look at him. Maybe he was one of those people who got too into movies, sitting as if the entire world depended on what happened on the screen. But something about his posture, it wasn't normal. I picked a seat near the middle, far enough from him to feel comfortable, but close enough to the exit. The previews ended, and the movie began. I settled into my seat, tried to forget the uneasy feeling creeping into my chest. But just as I started to relax, I heard it again, that same scuffling sound. It wasn't from the hallway this time. It was closer, inside the auditorium. My heart started pounding as I turned my head ever so slightly, scanning the rows behind me. Empty. Every seat, except for his. He hadn't moved. At least, I didn't think he had. I tried to focus on the movie, but every few minutes I caught myself glancing over. The man hadn't shifted an inch. No popcorn, no drink. Just sitting there motionless like he was waiting for something or someone. Then, for a split second, the screen flickered. Just static. When it came back, the seat at the far corner was empty. I froze, staring at where he had been. My breath caught in my throat, and my fingers gripped the armrest so tightly my knuckles turned white. Where did he go? The scuffling noise returned, louder this time. Closer, and then silence. I wanted to turn around to see if he was standing behind me, but I couldn't move. My body refused to cooperate. My eyes stayed glued to the screen, but I wasn't watching the movie anymore. All I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, drowning out everything else. I told myself to get up, to leave, but my legs felt like lead. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a single thought kept repeating, louder with every passing second. I wasn't alone. Halfway through the movie, just as the plot was getting intense, I heard it again, that scuffling noise. But this time, it wasn't distant. It was close, too close. The sound dragged across the floor, slow and deliberate, like someone sliding their feet on the sticky carpet. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my ears. I froze, gripping the armrests of my seat, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. But curiosity got the better of me. Slowly, I turned to look over my shoulder. The rows behind me were empty, completely empty. No shadows moving, no one crouching. Just the faint glow of the screen lighting up an endless expanse of vacant seats. Before I could settle back, the lights in the theater flickered violently, plunging everything into a surreal mix of shadows and static. The screen buzzed loudly, crackling with white noise. My breath caught in my throat as I stared, helpless, at the chaos around me. And then it stopped. Everything returned to normal in an instant, except for one thing. The man. The man who had been sitting at the far end of the theater. He was gone. I told myself, maybe he left, maybe he went to the restroom. But there was something off about it. He hadn't moved all night, not a single twitch, and now, without a sound or warning, he vanished. My stomach churned with unease. The movie eventually ended, though I couldn't recall a single thing about it. My focus had been everywhere but the screen. I stood, ready to leave, but when I pushed the auditorium doors, they wouldn't open. I frowned, trying again, harder this time, using my shoulder to shove against them. Nothing. The doors were solid, like they were welded shut. "Hello?" My voice echoed, swallowed by the empty theater. I banged on the door, the sound reverberating, but there was no response. My palms started to sweat as panic set in, and that's when I felt it, a presence. No sound, no movement, just the unmistakable sensation of being watched. It crawled up my spine like ice, making every hair on my body stand on end. I spun around, scanning the room. The seats were empty, the aisles deserted, but the feeling wouldn't leave. My chest tightened as I scanned every shadow, every corner, expecting to see something, anything. But there was nothing, only the dim glow of the screen casting eerie shades on the walls. I stayed frozen, my back pressed against the door, my mind racing. Who or what was in there with me? I decided I couldn't stay in that theater any longer. The thought of being trapped in that auditorium, with the lingering feeling of those unseen eyes on me, was too much. My breathing was shallow as I pushed through the shadows, heading toward another exit I'd noticed earlier. But something was wrong. The hallway, it didn't feel the same. It stretched unnaturally, far longer than it should have been. The dim lights above flickered weakly, casting shadows that seemed to shift on their own. My steps echoed unnaturally, each sound bouncing back at me louder than the last. I walked faster, my pulse quickening with each step. Just as I reached the door leading to the emergency stairs, a cold breeze swept past me. It wasn't just a draft. It felt purposeful, like icy fingers brushing against my skin. My breath hitched, and every hair on my arm stood on end. I spun around, expecting to see someone, anyone, but there was nothing. Just the same endless hallway behind me. My hands shook as I pushed the door open and bolted down the stairs. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my footsteps sounded deafening in the stairwell's silence. But when I reached the bottom, my stomach sank. The exit was blocked, chains wrapped tightly around the door, their rusted links holding a heavy padlock that looked far too solid to break. That door had been clear when I arrived. I was sure of it. Panic washed over me. I pulled out my phone, but the screen mocked me with no signal. I tried pacing, thinking of another way out, but no matter which corner I turned, the hallways all seemed to lead me back to the same spot. That's when the whispers began. They weren't words, at least not any I could understand. Just faint murmurs, like voices speaking too softly for me to catch. But they were random. They seemed to follow me, growing louder when I hesitated and quieter when I moved. "Who's there?" I yelled, my voice cracking with desperation. The whispers didn't answer. They just persisted, creeping into my mind, making me question if they were even real. I ran. I didn't care where. I just needed to move, to escape. But the whispers followed, wrapping around me like smoke, suffocating any hope I had left. Every hallway looked the same, and no matter how far I went, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Somewhere deep inside, I knew I wasn't alone, but I also knew that whatever was there didn't want me to leave. When I finally stumbled back into the lobby, I barely recognized it. The air felt heavier, as if the room itself was alive and watching me. The lights that once buzzed overhead were now dimmed to a faint, sickly glow, casting distorted shadows across the walls. The exit doors, which had been locked before, now stood wide open. But beyond them, there was nothing. No street lights, no parking lot, no faint glow from the moon. Just an all-consuming darkness that seemed to stretch endlessly. My feet froze on the spot, my body refusing to step closer. Something told me I shouldn't. I turned away from the open doors and ran back into the dim hallways, retracing my steps toward the auditorium. It felt safer somehow, though I couldn't explain why. When I reached it, I didn't hesitate. I slid into the exact same seat I'd started in, as if it could anchor me to reality. I waited. The silence was deafening, pressing against my ears until I thought I'd go mad. But I couldn't leave. I couldn't risk walking into that darkness. Time passed, minutes, hours, I don't know how long. The whispers returned, faint at first, like a distant breeze, but they grew louder, circling me like predators closing in. Then, just as suddenly as they had come, they stopped. I sat there, clutching the armrests, too afraid to move. I told myself it was over, but the truth was I didn't believe it. I don't think I ever will. That night, I somehow made it home. I don't remember how. I can't even recall seeing the parking lot again. But since then, I've never been the same. Every night, I dream of that place. I hear the whispers, the scuffling, and the flickering lights. I feel the eyes watching me, closing in as I sit frozen in that seat. And every time, without fail, the dream ends just as I stand and walk toward those open doors. I wake up drenched in sweat, my heart racing, my chest tight. I've tried telling myself it was all in my head, that it was just exhaustion or some elaborate nightmare. But deep down, I know better. I need help. Was it real? Was it all just a figment of my imagination? Or was something or someone really there that night? If you've experienced anything like this, please tell me. I don't know what else to do. I feel like whatever it was, it hasn't let me go. And this was one of our followers' stories. If you want your story to be told by us as well, leave it in the comments below this video. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this, we prepared the next video especially for you. Click here to watch it.